Hello, friends. I am staring at this lens because the silence in this house has become a physical weight lately, something I can almost touch. They tell you that 66 is the golden age, the time when you finally get to cash in the chips you have been stacking for decades. But the day after my birthday, the phone simply stopped ringing, and the world seemed to decide I was a ghost. I am Arthur, a man who wore the uniform and followed every single rule they ever wrote. I am sitting here in the same house I have owned for 30 years, right here in the suburbs, but it feels different now. The math simply does not add up anymore, and that is the raw truth of it. My pension looked like a solid mountain 20 years ago, but now it looks like a tiny molehill against the rising tide of inflation and property taxes. It is a terrifying realization. Have you ever felt that specific, cold panic deep inside your own chest at 3 in the morning? Before we go any deeper into this journey, please subscribe to the channel so we can stay connected through these hard times ahead. We need to stick together because the system certainly is not looking out for us. I have spent my life following the rules, thinking the social contract was solid, but now it feels like it was written in disappearing ink. Why is it that the harder we work, the less we seem to have in the end? Does that really feel like true freedom to you? Being a veteran means they thank you for your service with one hand, while the other hand adjusts the interest rates on your mounting debt. I have spent hours on hold this week, listening to that mindless elevator music, while my autonomy just slips away through some digital crack. The bureaucracy is a labyrinth designed to exhaust you until you stop asking for what you have rightfully earned. It is a failure of a system that views our dignity as an overhead cost to be minimized for the profit margin. Every trip to the grocery store is a fresh lesson in humiliation, watching that total climb while the bags get lighter. You start doing that miserable mental math, choosing between the medication that keeps your heart beating and the food that makes life worth living. It is a calculated, systemic squeeze that targets folks like us because they think we lack the energy to fight back. Well, they forgot one thing about men who have seen the worst of this world. We know exactly how to survive any possible hardship. The transition from being a functional gear in the machine to a discarded part happens so quietly you almost miss the shift. You wake up and realize the bureaucracy has moved your file to a different cabinet, one labeled maintenance only. They want us to feel obsolete, so we will stop demanding a seat at the table of our own lives. But I refuse to just sit here and fade. I am reclaiming my voice, and I am glad you are here with me for this very long journey ahead. Well, let's talk about this suburban dream that has slowly turned into a polished, suffocating cage for men like me. I walk outside my front door, and I don't see a community anymore. I see a collection of zoning violations waiting to happen. How is this freedom when the city council cares more about the height of my weeds than the fact that my retirement fund is being devoured by inflation? It feels like every single rule was designed to keep us perfectly compliant and broke right now. Now, consider the property taxes that keep climbing, even though the services in this neighborhood are basically disappearing before our eyes. I've paid into this system for decades, believing that my loyalty would eventually buy me a little bit of peace and quiet. Instead, I'm being taxed out of the very home I spent my entire adult life building with these two hands. Why is it that the government always finds a way to reach into your pocket when you have the least to give back right now? Then there is the absolute insanity of the local zoning laws here that treat a vegetable garden like a criminal enterprise. I wanted to plant some corn and potatoes to offset the insane cost of groceries. But the HOA sent a letter. Apparently, my front yard is for ornamental grass only, not for actual survival or self-sufficiency in a collapsing economy. Does it make any sense to anyone that we are forbidden from feeding ourselves, while the system fails to provide us with any other viable options for dignity. Well, the grocery store has become a weekly exercise in pure, unadulterated humiliation for anyone living on a fixed pension these days. I stand there in the aisle, staring at a carton of eggs that costs 3 times what it did last year. You start doing that miserable mental math, weighing the cost of your heart medication against the price of fresh meat. It is a systemic squeeze that targets our dignity, making us feel like beggars in our own country, despite our lifelong efforts and hard work. So, I look at my old service medals, and I wonder what exactly I was defending all those years ago in the mud. Was it this? A world where neighbours hide behind smart doorbells and security cameras instead of actually talking to the man living next door. We have traded genuine human connection for a false sense of safety, sold to us by the same corporations that profit from our isolation. It feels like the system has intentionally turned us into lonely, suspicious competitors for crumbs in this suburban wasteland. The bureaucracy is a deliberate labyrinth designed to exhaust your spirit until you simply stop asking for the benefits you earned. I spent 4 hours on hold yesterday, listening to that mindless, looping elevator music, while my autonomy just dripped away into a digital void. They want us to feel obsolete, like some discarded piece of machinery that no longer fits the modern assembly line. Is this really the reward for 40 years of honest labour and following every single rule they wrote for us to follow? Actually, the transition from being a functional gear to a discarded part happens so quietly that you might almost miss the shift entirely. You wake up one morning and realize the faceless bureaucracy has moved your file to a cabinet labeled "Maintenance Only." They view our human dignity as an overhead cost that needs to be minimized for the sake of the quarterly profit margin. It is a calculated cruelty that ignores the blood and sweat we invested into the foundation of this failing social contract we signed. Now, everything requires a digital signature or some third-party verification that seems specifically designed to exclude men of my generation. We have outsourced our trust to cold algorithms that don't know the difference between a real person and a tiny data point. This digital landscape creates a barrier of entry to basic services that feels like a deliberate strategy to keep us quiet. They want us to feel like ghosts in a machine that we helped build, but can no longer operate or even understand. Well, I'm sitting here in this kitchen, surrounded by the echoes of a life that was supposed to be secure and stable. The system promised me that if I worked hard and stayed quiet, I would be taken care of in the end. That was a lie, a beautiful and calculated deception designed to keep the wheels turning while the elite extracted the value. Now that I'm 66, I see the machinery for what it is, a meat grinder that finally ran out of fresh meat to process. So, how is this freedom when you can't even collect the rainwater that falls from the sky onto your own property? They have criminalized the very concept of self-sufficiency, because a man who doesn't need them is a man they cannot control or exploit. Every single regulation is a thread in a net designed to keep us dependent on a centralized grid for our most basic human needs. It's not about community standards. It is about ensuring that we remain obedient consumers until the very end comes. Then there is the crushing weight of the loneliness that comes when you realize the world has moved on without you. The phone doesn't ring anymore because the system has decided that your utility has finally reached its expiration date. You become an outcast in your own neighborhood, a relic of a time when a man's word and a handshake actually meant something. It's a systemic design to keep us weak by ensuring we remain isolated from one another in our collective struggle for a basic sense of survival. Well, the anger I feel isn't the explosive kind anymore. It is a cold, steady heat that clarifies my vision and resolve. I've realized that I have been a spectator in my own life for far too long, waiting for a permission that will never come. The bureaucracy doesn't care if I starve or freeze, as long as the paperwork is filed correctly and the statistics look good. I am reclaiming my right to exist on my own terms, outside their narrow definitions of human utility. Actually, the suburban dream has become a suburban cage, where the walls are made of property taxes and HOA fines. We are told to be grateful for the crumbs, while the system feasts on our collective labor and our remaining years. It is not just about the money, it is about the theft of our agency and our future by people who have never worked a day in the trenches. How can we call this a life when we are just surviving on their borrowed time and mercy? So I look at the grocery bags getting lighter every week, while the total on the screen keeps climbing higher and higher. You start to feel like a failure, even though you did everything right and followed every single instruction they ever gave you. It is a systemic failure of character, not mine, but the failure of a society that views the elderly as a burden on the economy. They want us to fade away quietly, so we don't bother the younger generations with our many human needs. Well, I spent 40 years building things for other people, thinking my service was an investment in a solid social contract. Now that contract feels like it was written in disappearing ink, leaving me with a fixed income that shrinks daily. The inflation is devouring my savings like a parasite, and there is no one to hold accountable for this robbery. Why should we keep playing a game that is so obviously rigged against the people who actually built the infrastructure of this entire country with sweat? Now I see the system at work every time I walk down the street, turning neighbors into competitors for scarce resources. We have been conditioned to fear one another instead of the people who are actually pulling the strings of our economy. It is a calculated strategy to keep us from organizing and demanding the dignity that we were promised decades ago. But they forgot that men who have survived the worst of this world still have plenty of fight left in their tired and calloused old bones. So the claustrophobia of this life is becoming unbearable, like a collar that gets a little bit tighter every single morning. I can't breathe in this atmosphere of constant surveillance and mounting debt that never seems to go away. The zoning laws, the taxes, and the digital exclusion are all parts of the same machine designed to crush our spirit. Well, I've decided that I'm done being a victim of their bureaucratic games and their corporate greed. It is truly time for a major change. Actually, the feeling of being an outcast is what finally broke the spell and allowed me to see the truth clearly. When you have nothing left to lose, you finally gain the freedom to do exactly what needs to be done. The system has discarded me, so I am choosing to discard the system in return, once and for all. I am trading the illusion of security for the reality of a hard, honest struggle. It is the only way to find my soul again today. Well, I've started looking at those old paper maps again, the ones with the folded edges that don't track your location. There are places where the system hasn't fully tightened its grip, where a man can still find a patch of earth. The transition is going to be brutal, moving from this comfortable decay to a life of raw autonomy. I am stripping my life down to the bone to see what is actually left. It is terrifying, but it is also the only path left. So, I'm sitting here in the silence, realizing that the only way forward is to step outside the boundaries they have drawn. The crisis of purpose I felt in the city is being replaced by the necessity of finding a way to survive. I won't just sit here and fade away like some ghost in the sprawl. Next, I will show you exactly how I began the search for a new life. Until next time, friends, let us rise together and find our true freedom now. Well, last night I sat at this very kitchen table until the sun peeked through the blinds, staring at a fresh envelope from the county assessor. It was a property tax hike that felt like a physical punch to my gut. a number so disconnected from my fixed reality that it made my old hands shake. I realized right then that no amount of skipping meals or turning down the thermostat would ever be enough to satisfy this hungry machine. The math is finally broken. Before we go any further, please subscribe to the channel so we can stay connected while the world tries to isolate us even more. I've decided right here and now that I am officially done playing their rigged game of survival. Why should I keep pouring my dwindling life savings into a house that the government essentially rents back to me through endless taxes and fees? I am putting the for sale sign in the yard tomorrow because I refuse to be a prisoner. Actually, I am 66 years old, and for the first time in decades, I feel a strange, terrifying sense of clarity washing over me today. They want us to sit quietly in these suburban boxes, waiting for a permission slip or a cost of living adjustment that will never actually cover the bills. Well, I am reclaiming my agency today by walking away from the table entirely. Selling this house isn't a defeat. It is the ultimate tactical retreat to a position of strength. Then, I look at every rule they wrote, realizing they were all designed to keep men like me dependent on a centralized grid that views us as obsolete data points. Why do we accept a life where we can't even grow our own food or collect the rain without facing a bureaucratic fine? I'm trading this illusion of security for a piece of dirt where the only boss is the weather and the soil. It is scary, but staying here is a slow death. So, I've already started packing the tools that actually matter, the ones that don't require a digital subscription or a high-speed internet connection to function out here. I'm looking at those old paper maps, finding the gaps in their surveillance where a man can still breathe without being tracked constantly. The system thinks it has discarded me, but it actually just set me free to find a real life again. I'm liquidating everything to find a new path toward freedom. Now this is the moment where the frustration turns into a sharp, cold resolve that I haven't felt since I wore the uniform. What do you think? Have you reached your breaking point with the rising costs yet? Let me know in the comments if you are also ready to stop asking for permission. In the next video, I will show you exactly how I found my piece of dirt. Until next time, friends, let us rise together and find our freedom. Well, the for sale sign is finally hammered into that ornamental grass they loved so much, and it feels like a heavy weight has been lifted off my tired shoulders. Before we dive into the gritty details of this escape, please subscribe to the channel so we can keep this conversation going while I'm on the move. Walking through these empty rooms makes me realize how much of my life was just stored in cardboard boxes and useless clutter. Is this really what they call success today? Actually, liquidating 40 years of existence in a single weekend was a brutal, eye-opening exercise in pure, unadulterated reality for a man like me. I watched strangers haggle over my old tools and furniture, trading my history for the cash I need to buy my actual freedom back from the system. Why do we spend our best years accumulating things that only serve to anchor us to a spot that no longer wants us there? It was hard work, but every dollar felt like a step forward. Now, I didn't go out and buy one of those shiny plastic RVs that look like a rolling hotel room because I need a tool, not a toy. I spent weeks scouring old classified ads for a sturdy 3/4-ton truck and a used utility trailer that I could actually fix with my own 2 hands. The goal was mechanical simplicity, something that doesn't require a computer or a specialized dealership to keep running when I'm out in the middle of nowhere. Does that make sense to you? So packing that trailer was a calculated puzzle that required every bit of my old military precision and focus to get exactly right for the road. I prioritized the things that actually sustain life, like my grandfather's hand tools, a massive stash of heirloom seeds, and every technical manual I could find. It's not about being comfortable anymore. It's about being functional in a world that is rapidly losing its ability to fix anything. Freedom isn't free, and it certainly isn't light when you're 66. Well, the logistical hurdles were a constant reminder that the system is designed to keep you exactly where you are, trapped in a web of paperwork. Getting the titles transferred and the insurance sorted for a transient life felt like a deliberate battle against a bureaucracy that hates mobility and independence. Every clerk I spoke to looked at me like I was losing my mind for leaving a stable home for a trailer. But tell me, how stable is a home you can't actually afford to keep now? Actually, the morning I finally pulled out of that driveway, I didn't feel the nostalgia I expected, only a sharp, cold sense of relief and total focus. Watching those identical suburban rooftops fade into the rearview mirror felt like shedding a layer of dead skin that had been suffocating my soul. I drove past the strip malls and the gated communities, realizing that most people are still asleep in their comfortable cages. Are you starting to see the cracks in the dream like I finally did today? Now, don't think for a second that this journey has been some kind of glamorous scenic vacation, because the reality of the road is much harsher than that. I've spent nights in noisy truck stops and dusty parking lots, feeling the cold seep through the floorboards while the wind rocked the trailer. My back aches, and my hands are stained with grease from a roadside repair that took 4 hours in the rain. This is the raw price of autonomy, and I would pay it again. So, I've been using those old paper maps to find the rural fringes where the zoning laws are just suggestions, and the land is still affordable. I'm looking for a specific patch of earth with a reliable water source and enough timber to keep me warm through a long winter. It's a slow, methodical search that requires patience and a keen eye for what the land is actually telling you. Have you ever stood on a piece of dirt and felt its potential for true survival? Well, I'm sitting here by the side of a 2-lane highway tonight, knowing that the hardest part of this execution is still waiting for me ahead. I'm trading my remaining years for the chance to breathe clean air and answer to no one but the seasons and my own conscience. In the next video, I'm going to show you the actual property I finally found after weeks of searching. Until next time, everyone, let us rise together and find our true freedom now. We can do this. Hello, friends. Please subscribe to this channel so we can stay connected while I navigate this raw and unvarnished new chapter of my life. I finally pulled the truck off that dusty Forest Service road and stepped out onto this rugged patch of earth today. The air smells like damp pine and ancient stone, a sharp clarity that makes the stale suburban air feel like a distant, suffocating memory. My boots sank into the honest dirt, and the absolute silence made my ears ring with a strange, beautiful peace. The journey wasn't easy, and I spent 3 hours fighting a stubborn flat tire in a freezing mountain downpour that nearly broke my spirit. My hands are stained with grease, and my old back is screaming in protest, but I didn't have to call for a tow or wait for a bureaucratic permission slip. I fixed it myself with my own tools, proving my utility isn't determined by a spreadsheet. This obstacle was a test, and standing here, I realize my struggle is the only thing that belongs to me. I used to think being discarded by the city was a failure, a final defeat for a man who followed every rule. Now, watching the sun hit the ridge, I see the system didn't reject me. It set me free from a cage I didn't know I lived in. The property taxes and zoning laws can't reach me here in the margins, where the only boss is the seasons. This isn't a retreat. It is a reclamation of my soul from a machine that wanted to grind me into dust. I knelt down and ran my fingers through the cold, dark earth, feeling the grit under my fingernails like a badge of honor. There is no digital signature required out here, and no algorithm can quantify the purpose I feel standing on my own sovereign territory. The poverty the system warned me about feels like luxury because my labor is finally mine. I can breathe without asking for permission, and for the first time in 66 years, I am exactly where I am supposed to be in this world. Please share your thoughts in the comments about what true freedom looks like to you, because we need to build this community of resilience together. In the next video, I will show you how I am scouting the site for my cabin and securing water before the frost hits. The road was long and the cost was high, but the view from this ridge makes every struggle worth the price. Until next time, friends, let us rise together and find our true freedom. We will get there together. Well, I am standing here on this ridge, looking at the long shadow my new life is casting across this honest dirt today. I have realized that the silence I once feared in that empty suburban house wasn't an enemy, but a teacher waiting for me to listen properly. It told me that the safety I chased for 40 years was just a fragile veil draped over a hungry machine. True security isn't found in a pension fund or a government promise that evaporates when inflation arrives. Actually, we have been conditioned to believe that autonomy is a dangerous myth and that we must remain tethered to the centralized grid to survive. They want us to feel small and incapable, so we never question the rising taxes or the laws that forbid us from feeding ourselves. But standing here, with the grit under my fingernails and the wind in my face, I see the absolute lie for what it is. We are far stronger than the bureaucracy wants us to ever realize today. So, what have I learned from this brutal transition from a compliant gear to a sovereign man living in the rural fringe? I learned that your value is not a data point on a spreadsheet managed by a clerk who has never seen a sunset. I am 66 years old, and my worth is measured by the strength of my character and my ability to adapt when the world stops making any sense. We must stop asking for permission and start building our own resilience in this life. Well, the system thrives on our isolation, keeping us tucked away in our little boxes, where we can only consume what they sell us. They want us to view our neighbors as competitors for crumbs, instead of allies in a shared struggle for human dignity. It makes me sick to see how we have been divided by their greed and their cold policies. Out here, I have found that a community of the discarded is more powerful than any corporate structure. Please share your story in the comments below now. So, let us rise together and build something that will last long after the machines have stopped humming and the bureaucracies have faded away. The path is clear and the tools are in our hands, and the only thing left is to take that first step toward our total autonomy today. I am looking forward to hearing your thoughts and seeing your progress as we create a world of true resilience and dignity. See what happens next when I dig the well. Until next time, everyone, let's rise together.